Ari, honey, I am holding up a revised version of this book, like the book on red light therapy. And for someone who's never tried it, let's just go back to the basics. What exactly is red light therapy?
All right. So I think it's useful. I'm glad you asked this because I think it's really useful to, when you have a complex topic, to break things down into first principles, which is basically just like what are the simplest components of it. So let's start with the basic big picture context, which is light is something that normally we don't really think of in terms of having an effect on human biology. We have a couple layers where we're sort of used to thinking of it. One is we know about the sunlight and vitamin D story. And most people don't really know, but they have some vague idea that sunlight, does something to their body that creates vitamin D. Vitamin D is like important for immune function, or maybe that it relates to calcium and your bones or something like that. But, just that's one layer of the story. Even just that one little layer is actually a huge aspect of human health. And vitamin D is involved in regulating the expression of over 2,000 genes, immune health, musculoskeletal health, all kinds of things. Now, that is the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. And even within that, vitamin D is only a part of that story. Ultraviolet also has other effects on our body. It stimulates melanin production in our skin, which actually there's layers of mechanisms involving melanin and how that affects our health beyond just darkening our skin. We have nitric oxide signaling from ultraviolet, which also goes systemic and affects blood flow. We have the heat from the sun that is bioactive, that's being absorbed in water, that's affecting our physiology. We have the blue light and the circadian rhythm component of this. And so blue light is entering our eyes and feeding back into neurons that go into the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the brain, which is where our biological clock resides. And that circadian clock is then influencing all kinds of metabolic and hormonal processes, gene expression, almost everything. The circadian clock interfaces with almost everything. And when you start to build out this story, you realize, most people think of light as just like, oh, light is something that helps me see. Light is the opposite of darkness. I flip a light switch on in a room so I can see. We're not used to thinking of light as something that's bioactive, something that affects the way our physiology operates on a fundamental level. But it does. And even if you just understand those two layers of the story that I just explained alone, just those two layers have massive, far-reaching consequences on human health. Now, there is another layer, which is fascinating and a little bit harder for us to grasp in general. And that is the understanding that light doesn't just go in our eyes and affect a circadian clock in our brain and trigger that whole cascade of reactions. It doesn't just stop at the layer of our skin where ultraviolet stimulates vitamin D production. There are actually certain parts of the spectrum of light, specifically red and near infrared light, which penetrate into our body beneath the skin, and in fact can penetrate inches deep into our tissues. And those photons of light are bioactive directly by interacting with our cells, okay? Inches deep into our body. So this is like something more analogous to what people are used to thinking about with plants, right? A plant takes in light and it triggers this whole process of photosynthesis. They have chlorophyll and, it triggers this reaction. And so plants are very dependent on light. We're not used to thinking of human cells as directly receiving light and doing something with it. But in fact, human cells are unquestionably highly responsive to light. Light is bioactive at the level of human biology, and especially this part of the spectrum called red and near infrared light. So that's sort of the first principles. The next part of this story is like, what does it do?
What happens when we shine a red or near infrared light on our body and it's going in inches into our cells?
Yes. So, one interesting layer to think about before you even start to talk about mechanisms is why? why would human biology, and actually it's mammalian biology more broadly, why would it have evolved over millions of years?
Millions, by the way, millions people.
Yes.
We've been studying the universe with our son as of recent, and the biology of life here on this planet, and it's really intriguing.
Yes. So why would we have evolved biology that allows this light to penetrate beneath our skin? Because if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum more broadly, so if you just look at the visible spectrum of light, and this is Roy G. Biv, this is the colors of the rainbow, almost none of those colors of light, which are all part of the sun, almost none of those colors penetrate beneath the skin. They all pretty much stop in the initial layers of the skin. Okay, you're talking about yellow light, green light, blue light, ultraviolet light. They all stop in the layers, the initial layers of the skin. But red and near infrared light, it's specifically part of the electromagnetic spectrum that is from about, especially from 600-ish to 900-ish nanometers. That specific part of the spectrum penetrates beneath the skin very deeply into the body. So the first thing to realize is like, why would we have evolved to do that? Is it a mistake? Probably not, particularly since we know that it's bioactive. It interacts with our cells, right? So there's something going on there that over millions of years, we evolved the transparency of our tissues to this band of the electromagnetic spectrum. We evolved to allow it in, okay? And then once you understand that, then the question is, why? What is it doing? And once you understand things from that frame, you start to go, well, now it makes sense why we have, at this point, as of 2026, over 6,000 studies showing all kinds of benefits from exposure to red and near infrared light. And technologies, whether LED, whether laser technologies, for all kinds of purposes. The literature is so vast. It's everything from, speeding wound recovery and combating skin aging to combating hair loss to helping regulate, hormonal production, like shine it on your thyroid gland. It helps your thyroid gland. It improves body composition. It improves recovery from exercise, right? This list of things, it's been used in innumerable things, but like random things, like let's say diabetic ulcer treatment, let's say neuropathy, let's say side effects from chemotherapy, like oral mucositis. You shine red light in the mouth and it stimulates healing and combats this terrible, painful side effect of chemotherapy drugs, right? Like, why would this light have so many different beneficial effects on so many different tissues for so many different purposes? It's kind of like when you hear this list of benefits, it arouses skepticism and it makes you think, is this, this person must be trying to sell me on something. There's no way one thing could possibly have so many different kinds of benefits and so many different tissues and organ systems for all kinds of different things. And the reason why is really from this evolutionary frame, it starts to make sense. It's sort of the same question of like, why adequate sleep, really prioritizing sleep will be beneficial for every system of the body. Why really good nutrition will be beneficial for every system of the body. You're providing the body something that it has actually evolved to require in order for your cells to operate at their best, to operate with optimal health and optimal gene expression. Okay. So from that frame, it starts to make sense why this has so many different benefits and so many different organ systems of the body. And if you want, we can, I don't know where you want to go from here.
I want to go. I think I want to go down the pathway of a little bit of evolution and why did we evolve to be so receptive to red light and near infrared light?
Yeah. Well,
for a brief moment, and then we'll get into application and mechanisms, because I know that's what people are going to care about. Like, how does this actually help my thyroid and aging? I mean, I have every friend in midlife right now has a red light mask.
Well, it's sort of the same question of like, well, why did we evolve for vitamin D to be responsive to ultraviolet light, right? Mm-hmm. Why did we evolve a circadian rhythm that is responsive to blue light, right? I don't know that anyone has a good explanation of like
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I just meant,
why it was specifically UV light that is responsible for vitamin D, or why specifically blue light for the circadian. There are some explanations for that one. Like there's a logic to, for example, if you look outside right now at the sky, you see a blue sky.
Mhm.
And it makes sense for that particular part of the spectrum to be the signal to your brain that it's daytime as opposed to nighttime, because the blue light goes away at nighttime. So that there's a certain logic to that that makes a lot of sense. This seems to be, as far as I can tell, maybe somebody has a better answer to this than I do, but for whatever reason, animal biology evolved in such a way where certain parts of the cell became sensitized, much like vitamin D became linked to UV. Certain parts of the cell became sensitized to red and near infrared light in particular. Maybe because just by chance alone, our tissues evolved more transparency to that part of the spectrum. And so because the light was coming in, biology evolved something to do with it, right? It's like, well, we got all this free energy coming in. Let's figure out how to use it. And it would make sense just from a purely, natural selection point of view that that biology that was able to capitalize on that huge source of free energy, the sun, this massive ball of fire, just
why we're here.
exploding the surface of the earth with this enormous amount of energy every day, that biology that evolved to use that energy as opposed to just let it pass through your tissues or block it and not let it do anything, would have an advantage over biology that didn't capitalize on all that energy. And the magical frequency seems to be this red and near infrared light. There's some interesting papers that have argued that human hairlessness, the reason we're not furry animals is, some of us are furrier than others, though. But the human hairlessness evolved actually to let light into the body.
Mm.
Right? So, yeah, I think that's probably the best answer I could give. It's just like massive free energy. We figured out some cool stuff to do with it.
Let's talk about some cool stuff to do with it, because it's still, I know for some people it is a non-negotiable. For others, it still feels a bit elective. As I confess to you before getting started on this show or this interview, we have a really great red light unit. We don't use it too often.
Yeah.
Whereas I prioritize sleep like it's a job, and I prioritize nutrition like it's also a second job. And so talk to me about, should this be a non-negotiable for us? Is it depending on the person? Is it depending on the circumstance? You talked about wound healing, thyroid support. Should we have it with us in case some of these things come up for us?
There's a lot there. They're great questions. First of all, listen, we all know the stories of somebody buys exercise equipment and then they end up using it as a clothes hanger, right? That's the sort of the classic story with home gym equipment. Yeah, I mean, stuff takes time. It takes effort. But the biggest thing is, especially you and I know each other personally, we're both very busy, as a lot of people are these days. And if you've got a red light unit that requires you to sit in front of it or stand in front of it for 10 or 20 minutes, oftentimes we just don't make the time for it. Same as meditation. We don't make the time for it.
Yeah. Would you choose surfing over a red light session? I'm curious.
Probably, yes. Yeah. Surfing's a lot more fun than standing in front of the light.
Fun.
Yeah, no question. So, yeah, I mean, one of the key sort of hacks in that regard is to pair it with something so that it doesn't require extra time. And there are various ways of accomplishing that. If you have a dedicated practice of meditation, let's say, then you just sit in front of the light. That's one simple way. Another way is you have a device that's more of a portable device. Like I have this guy right here. Let's see if you can see that.
I can see it. Yeah. It's very portable.
And you can just put this on and you can strap it to your body, or I can have it just strapped. Let's say I'm using it on my knee or something. I injured my knee in tennis. Let's say I want to get some red and near infrared light therapy on there. I strap it on as I'm doing this podcast, right? It doesn't take any extra time from me that way. And that's the key between using it and not using it. If it takes 20 more minutes out of your day, it's infinitely less likely to be done. The other aspect of it is it's not a stimulant, and it's not like a cold plunge, let's say, or exercise. where you can instantly notice some very strong subjective effect from it. Sometimes that happens, let's say in pain relief, but let's say you're using it for hair loss, which is a purpose I use it for because I'm prone to hair loss. It's not like I put my helmet on and 10 minutes later I'm like, wow, I'm less bald. I have way more hair than I used to. It's something that over months of use, we know that the research has shown reduces hair loss compared to not using it and stimulates growth of hair. But it's something that would be measured in a study objectively in a way where you would quantify it. This group used the device, this group didn't use the device, and we saw that this group had 25% regrowth, whereas this group had 15% loss, right? And that effect is subtle enough and occurring over a long enough timeline that as an individual doing that over the course of 3 months or 6 months, you're probably not even going to notice anything, right? You're probably not going to actually go, what's probably going to happen is you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to say, I think maybe I have a little bit more hair than I used to have, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just imagining it. Maybe this device doesn't really do anything. I don't know, right? And the same is true with so many other purposes. Let's say you're using it for skin anti-aging. Let's say it's the same kind of dynamic. I still have some wrinkles. The research there is like it slows wrinkles, it can reduce wrinkle depth, but we're talking about it doesn't take you from being 55 to looking like you did at 25. And it certainly doesn't do that in the course of 5 sessions, right? We're talking about more subtle effects than that. And subjectively, when things are subtle and they're occurring over long enough timelines, the brain goes, I don't know if it's doing anything. Same with a meditation practice. I don't know if this meditation practice is doing anything. Like, I can give you 1,000 examples of things like this. Let's say you're very familiar with like research linking cruciferous vegetable consumption and reductions in, I don't know, let's say neurological disease or heart disease, or eating blueberries and reduce risk of Alzheimer's. Okay. You can eat blueberries every day for 6 months and you will not notice anything, that any particular benefit of any kind, certainly not related to dementia, that you can directly attribute and say, wow, the blueberries are really paying off, right? So this is kind of this element of lots of things work on this level of subtlety over long time frames, and you kind of have to just trust what the research has shown works. Eat the blueberries, eat the broccoli, do your red light therapy, do your meditation, right? And you will, over time, put yourself on a different health trajectory than if you weren't doing those things.
I want to have you speak into consistency, because as I think we've talked a little bit about that and alluded to that this is one of those lifestyle strategies or tools that we should be consistent with if we're looking for, I don't know, measurable results or some level of results. Like it's built into your day.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to all these other analogous strategies that you might engage with. Like, imagine if someone adopts a nutritious diet, but they like, yeah, every 1 week out of 3, I eat well. And the other 2 weeks out of 3, I eat poorly. Like, how likely is that to be? Well, it's better than doing nothing.
Better than nothing.
It's better than all 3 weeks being a poor diet, but it's not enough, The same with exercise, the same with meditation, the same with anything. You have to have a level of consistency with applying the therapy, the intervention, the way of living in order to accumulate benefits. And if you stop, you lose it.
I hear you. I hear that. There's a lot of, I was going to say, this industry has really blown up since you wrote this book, since you wrote the book initially. And, even I feel like I have to go and do some serious research around the efficacy of any company that's approaching me about their red light units to talk about them or to educate about them. And so how do we even begin to decipher, what is a viable, product to be using? Like the handheld one, I would be a little skeptical about that just because it looks a little sketchy,
Okay.
Whereas my big mega unit over here that like we have to wheel somewhere.
It looks big and powerful.
It's pretty legit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is really why I wrote the book, is there's vast complexity in this, and I'm going to try to break things down into a frame that we can go deeper in. The very quick answer to and direct answer to your question is there is an enormous amount of poor quality devices, worthless devices, junk devices on the market that are a waste of money, that won't do anything valuable. This whole industry, the space has exploded, and there are lots of bad actors who are just trying to make a quick buck, put together some device, put together a copycat device, start selling it, put on their website with all kinds of wacky claims. And to add to it, there is a huge amount of misrepresentation and lying going on as far as the power of their devices, like how much light output. It's called
Right. Yeah.
irradiance.
There's some big claims out there about what they can do or what this particular device can do. Like,
Right.
for instance, a lot of the anti-aging devices I see out there, the mask, there's some big, boisterous claims being made.
Yeah. So massive claims being made, overt lying about the power of the devices is rampant. In addition to that, further amplifying the complexity of that is more power isn't always better. There are contexts where you don't want more
What?
power. Okay.
Not
And
max power?
I know it's kind of counterintuitive. More is not always better. Bigger is not always better. It's context specific. But in this case, depending on what your goal is, a big, large LED panel isn't necessarily the best device for a particular goal. Let's say your goal is brain health. Let's say your goal is treating a joint. Let's say your goal is facial anti-aging. Let's say your goal is hair loss. There are better devices for each one of those purposes than a large LED panel. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, gosh, it's so funny because when I think about how this was proposed to me, the big Ellie, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, it's like,
Good for everything.
yeah,
The
good for
best for
everything.
everything.
Your thyroid, your brain,
Yes.
your metabolism, your immune system. Like, if you're gonna get something, like spend the $2,000 or the $1,500, get the big mamma jamma that covers up most of your body.
That's right. And there's an element of truth to that, which we'll talk about in a second. But the point that I want to make first is that there are many contexts, like the ones I just listed, where a goal specific or body part specific device will be much better than a large LED panel, and where less power might be better than more power. So specifically, the main one is facial anti-aging. So facial anti-aging, you don't want a real powerful device. Actually, the studies are clear that a lower irradiance device, somewhere in the realm of, let's say, 10 to about 40 or 50 milliwatts per square centimeter, this is a measure of light intensity or irradiance, is ideal. And a lot of these panels are, bragging as the major selling point that they're 100 or 150 or 175 milliwatts per square centimeter. Well, first of all, it's not true in most cases. They're lying in the vast majority of cases. But second, even if it was true, you wouldn't want that for that goal. So you would actually, if it were that powerful, you would want to actually avoid using it on your face because it might do more harm than good. So yeah, there are lots of layers of complexity, but part of what I'm trying to do with this book is clean up all the shadiness and pseudoscience and fraudulent claims that are rampant in the industry. So with that out of the way, let me present like a better context for understanding how to think about this. So the first question to ask is, what is your goal? What are you actually trying to achieve? Okay. Are you somebody who wants to prioritize, you want to look more beautiful, you want to prioritize facial skin anti-aging? Do you want hair loss? To combat hair loss, are you an athlete that is looking to enhance performance or to enhance recovery from exercise? Do you want to improve your body composition? Do you want to improve your thyroid function? Do you have arthritis and you're looking to combat joint pain? Do you have diabetic ulcers or neuropathy and you're looking to address that? Or, and these are all very specific, like body part specific goals. Or are you looking for general wellness, anti-aging, longevity? Okay, overall health, general health support, let's call it. And so once you have clarity on that, now we can start to figure out, okay, what is the ideal device for you based on that? Are you targeting this is the next layer. Are you targeting superficial tissues that are close to the surface, or very
Yeah.
Yeah, like skin, or something on the skin, like skin wounds, diabetic ulcers, anything like that, anything skin related? Or do you want to treat deep tissues? Like, for example, in order to deliver light to the brain, not only do you have to get through the skin, you have to get through the skull or the hair and all of those things. But to get through the skull, you need a certain kind of device. You need a powerful device, and you need it that can actually, because every little millimeter of tissue that light goes through, the intensity of the light drops
It
dramatically.
dims. Yeah.
Yes. So in order to get through tissue, especially bone, thick bone like the skull, you got to have a powerful light at the starting point, because by the time any light, if any light at all, is able to penetrate through the skull, it's going to be a tiny fraction of what's on the surface. Okay. And that light has to be applied in the right way. So light that's out here far away from my head versus the light directly applied to my scalp, that light is going to penetrate very differently, right? So do I want superficial or deep? And that is going to heavily influence it. So that's kind of like the starting point, is what are you looking to achieve? Are you trying to treat superficial or deep tissues? And then from there, we can break down specific goals.
I want to ask, when you stumbled upon the research, 'cause I'm curious, I'm kind of curious how you stumbled upon the research, 8 years ago, I want to say. Was
I wrote the book 8 years
8 years?
ago.
So
No,
stumbled upon the research probably at least 10 years ago.
I was studying it way before that. Yeah,
Okay.
probably 15.
What most excited you? Like, where is the juice worth the squeeze? When I'm hearing about trying to get the red light to penetrate into the brain, and, I'm curious, is the juice worth the squeeze there? Diabetic ulcers, that feels, or wound healing, that feels like if I was a diabetic and I was that far down the line of type 2 diabetes and I started to experience, wounds on my feet and my hands, besides something topical and hopefully maybe taking on some lifestyle strategies to mitigate some of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd hope so. I would want to bring on something like this to help quicken the wound healing at this point. But when you were looking at the research initially, what was the benefits of using a red light or infrared light? What was most exciting to you about it? Was it the overall longevity, Ari? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
It wasn't hair
I
growth.
would
I have
say,
a
like,
feeling.
maybe this is like you, but
Yeah.
I've just always like kind of seen myself as a guinea pig.
Okay.
So anything that can possibly enhance my performance or my health, I'm like, count me in, sign me up. So I discovered kind of some of this research showing that red light and near infrared light had this unique effect. And a lot of the research on that at that time was uniquely focused on the mechanism of how it affected mitochondria specifically.
Obviously.
Photons are getting absorbed by cytochrome C oxidase and enhancing mitochondrial energy production. So I was like, okay, I want to shine this all over my body and get that benefit. And it's improving, the function of all these different tissues. And I've been an athlete all my life. So the research on performance enhancement, on recovery from exercise, on amplifying the benefits of exercise. Like, one of the other benefits is, for example, shining it on muscles after you work out and speeds recovery, but also amplifies growth factors in those tissues and amplifies, kind of synergizes with exercise to increase the adaptations, not only the speed of adaptations, but increase the total amount of adaptations, like strength or like endurance, like hypertrophy.
Yeah, muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah. So, like, how can I use it? Start using it in those contexts. Funny story is that, and I haven't talked much about this in public, but before any companies even existed in this space, before there was any company selling an LED panel, I was for 2 or 3 years having LED panels created. So I was like, as far as I know, the first. Maybe someone else did it around the same time or before me, but I reached out to a marijuana growing light company, and I saw them producing these LED panels, and I was like, can you guys produce them with custom LEDs, specifically at 660 nanometers and 850 nanometers? And they were producing dozens or hundreds of these lights for me and my clients for like a couple years. And then at some point they reached out to me and they're like, why are you ordering these weird lights that are all red and near infrared? Like, they didn't even understand why they were making these lights. Now that company has gone on to be a multi-million-dollar company in the space as a result of me cueing them into this. But that's kind of how it started is I was getting these custom panels from a marijuana growing light company and, doing experimentation with them. But yeah, that's kind of the origin story for me.
I love that. Okay, so mitochondrial biogenesis was really the impetus for looking deeper into this, which obviously makes so much sense. Obviously,
Mm,
all right. I thought maybe it was performance, mitochondrial enhancement, and overall boosting cellular energy
yeah.
was what I was.
Well, it's also like, hey, I'm just enamored with the fact that there this crazy thing that the photons of light are interacting with my cells. Like, I want to experiment with that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I love it. And now I feel like it's really opened up to so many different ways that we can utilize this.
Right.
So if it was that if you wanted specifically to target hair growth, this would be a device that you would look at versus one that was targeting anti-aging or versus one that was general mitochondrial biogenesis, where we'd be
Yes.
looking at maybe a bigger panel. A lot of you would be sitting in front of it.
Right. So let me give you another layer to
Mhm.
this story. So we talked about what is your goal, superficial or deep tissues.
Mhm.
Another layer to this story is total dose versus dose delivered to the tissues. Okay. And this relates to the other two goals as well. So if your primary objective is like facial skin anti-aging, then you are interested in the light directly interacting with these cells. If your interest is combating arthritis or affecting a certain muscle or tendon injury or ankle sprain or something like that, you want to focus on the light, the dose of light delivered directly to those tissues. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if you are interested in general anti aging, health, longevity, a bigger and not necessarily affecting one specific tissue or another in your body, the bigger concern is actually the total dose of light delivered to your overall body. Okay. And the reason why is basically that there are local effects from red and near infrared light therapy, which are the effects of the light directly interacting with those cells. And there are systemic effects of red and near infrared light therapy. So by getting light essentially anywhere on your body in a significant dose, there are various mechanisms by which that light creates systemic effects that cascade through your entire physiology. Okay. And those include shifting the immune phenotype, the immune system phenotype from a pro-inflammatory to an anti-inflammatory phenotype. They include stimulating immune function. They include probably one of the biggest, there's nitric oxide, there's other biochemical changes in the blood, there's effects on oxygen carrying capacity of red blood cells, there's combating oxidative stress, there's a release of melatonin into the bloodstream, which is a potent antioxidant, and maybe the most important layer, though is not well talked about, is not well discussed by most people on this topic, is actually stem cells. And stem cells, there's two layers to the story. One is that there are local stem cells in the place where the light is received directly. So let's say I injure my jaw, I shine light on my jaw, and the local stem cells in those tissues are going to become more active. I'm stimulating them with the light. The stem cells are directly responsive to red and near infrared light. The other effect that happens is a secretion, a release of stem cells into the bloodstream. And when those stem cells are now circulating in your bloodstream, they now can be involved in repairing other tissues in need, replacing cells in the bloodstream, whether red blood cells or immune cells, and creating this generalized pro anti-inflammatory and pro tissue repair environment across the entire system. And this is again kind of a subtle effect that is not going to, it's not like getting stem cells injected where, and even that's kind of subtle. A lot of people don't even notice anything in
Yeah,
particular, even
I'll notice.
yeah, even weeks after that. But this is going to be a lower quantity of stem cells, maybe different types of stem cells that exert effects over longer period of time as you do this more frequently. But the big distinction there that's important is like, how often do you get a stem cell treatment?
It depends. I mean, often it's usually because of a big injury.
Right. Maybe if you're committed to it, maybe you get it once every 6 months, once every year. Okay. But this is something that you can do to stimulate stem cells every other day,
Yeah.
every day if you want to. You
Mhm.
know, you stimulate local stem cells directly in that environment. You simulate systemic stem cell release. So once you understand these two effects, that there are systemic and local effects going on, the next key to understand is in most cases, most goals, you actually want to leverage both. Okay. And this is part of the complexity of this area. And there's still so much that's not known. I would say the science is very much still in its adolescence, but there are all kinds of layers of evidence from research where they've shown, let's say, an effect on brain function from shining light on the legs or the abdomen. Okay. And that you can improve, let's say, a brain problem. This has been done in animals, it's been done in humans. You can improve metrics of brain function or combat brain related problems through light. You take animals, you put tinfoil all over their heads so they can't possibly receive light there. And you shine light only on their legs. And you can measure improvement in their brain that is, in some studies, similar to the improvement that you get from shining light directly on the brain, right? So what this tells us is that there is this kind of mysterious element of like how much of the effect was mediated through local direct interaction of the light with those tissues and how much of it was mediated by systemic effects.
Hmm. Well, and when we're looking at that research specifically about the systemic effects, I would say, I mean, and not to say that people don't have multiple devices in their home, depending on what they're doing, but bigger a bigger light bed would make more sense. Kind of what you started with initially for you and your customers.
So, yes, as a generalization for overall systemic benefits, which is where if your goal is more general health, wellness, anti-aging, you probably want to focus more on systemic benefits. Okay. And in order to maximize those systemic benefits, the number one most important aspect is total dose delivered to the body, kind of anywhere on the body. The total amount of light, measured in joules, the total amount of light delivered to your tissues. And what's critical to understand is, let's say you've got a very small device, something, approximately this size, the size of your palm or something like that. Or, there are devices even smaller than that. A flashlight, let's say. If you compare that, even if it's a powerful device in terms of irradiance, the light intensity is very high. If you compare that to a full body panel that is emitting light at a moderate irradiance, but the surface area of light coverage is massive, you might get a dose from that large light panel that could be hundreds or even thousands of times greater in terms of the total light delivered to your tissues. Okay. So that's another element that a lot of people really don't get. A lot of the focus is on kind of the intensity of the light and that as being the key thing. But the other thing is like, well, how big of a surface area is that intensity of light hitting? What is the total amount of light delivered to the tissue? Because that is going to hugely impact on those systemic effects, like the release of stem cells into your circulation, for example. Now, the other aspect of that is that sort of the nuance there is if you want to leverage the stem cell effect, you actually want to deliver light. It's not only total dose delivered, it also has to do with directing light on the areas rich in stem cells and having a powerful enough light that you can deliver light to the deep tissues in those areas. So in general, bony processes that are close to the skin, so like your shin bone, for example, or the front of where your hips are, on the sides there, if you feel around your hips, you feel that bony process in the front, or your sacrum, places like that, your sternum. These are places where if you take a powerful device like this that you can apply directly to those areas, you can, and some of this is speculative, but it has been shown in numerous studies, you can stimulate release of stem cells into circulation by applying it to those areas. Whereas if you used a lower power device, or if you used a device that was, let's say, a foot away from you or 18 inches away from you, you might not get a significant quantity of light into those specific bone to penetrate into those bony tissues to stimulate the stem cells that are locked in there.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there is a lot to consider. I think about how many times I've been in gone to a facility where they've got red light beds and people aren't asking these questions. They're just getting in the bed.
That's right. Yeah. And that's the thing is there's this kind of, it's all very much in its adolescence might even be generous. Maybe infancy could be better in some contexts. But a lot of what's going on right now is it's sort of like the Wild West. We just have this sort of vague notion of like red and near infrared light are good for us.
Right. There's benefit.
Right. There's benefit. There's this benefit and that benefit. And it's implied when you list off all these benefits that all those benefits have been shown to be associated with that kind of device.
Right.
And that is often not true.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, I'm actually very surprised to say this, but the research on panels is shockingly thin. Even as 2025, these panels have been on the market for 8, 9, 10 years. Like there's very few studies that have been done on panels. And, the body of literature is actually one of the big problems with it is that you have massive variation in the types of devices used. Some might be LED, some might be laser, massively different dosages, massively different ways of applying the light. But, as I said before, depending on the device you use, you might get a difference in total light delivered that's orders of magnitude different. You might, with one device, you might not be able to effectively deliver any light at all to those deep tissues, whereas another device that's much more powerful, you can get a lot of light to those deep tissues. So there's all this variation in the literature. And then we have, we've accumulated thousands of studies that do show benefits. But then what a lot of device manufacturers are doing is they're saying, well, this study over here, which used a laser device, showed that it combated arthritis. Therefore, I can list for my panel that it combats arthritis. Right. And that's just not really true. There has never been a study on panels and arthritis. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that going on.
That makes sense. Yeah, it feels like I know that there was a lot of details about the panel that we have here, and I couldn't tell you what they are anymore in terms of like what is the amount of joules or radiance that's coming off of this particular panel.
Well, even worse than that, the manufacturer probably, in most cases, probably lied about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awfully true. So let's say I'm going to give an example or kind of a scenario, because I know that's a big part of why you rewrote this book was that even your research from 8 years ago was outdated, and you wanted to be able, especially now that so much has changed in this industry, you wanted to really update, how to help the consumer get the biggest benefit specifically for what they wanted to use. And so let's say the average person, my perimenopausal rock star woman is really looking for enhanced energy and performance and really resilience. She has bought into what we're putting down, which is cellular energy is everything, and if we can enhance that, what would you recommend if we were focused specifically on cellular energy and just overall? Again, we wouldn't necessarily feel it per se like we would if we were sprint running or if we were we were using hormone replacement therapy where we may feel that pretty quickly, but we wanted to be consistent. What would we be looking for, Ari?
Yeah. I would say to maximize systemic benefits, you want a large device, a large panel, or potentially a pod. The only reason I don't necessarily speak about pods more is that they're very expensive. Yeah. So they might be, in most cases, tens of thousands of dollars. And so for most people, financially, they're just not an option. They also take up a lot of space. So they're more commonly in like commercial facilities and businesses, but some more and more now wealthy people are putting them in their homes. Pods are probably the best for maximizing.
I've seen a pod before. Look this up.
I know a bunch of people in our neck of the woods in San Diego that are very wealthy that have them in their homes now. Yeah. So, but it's also possible to kind of DIY your own pod with getting several large panels. You can just imagine if I've got, let's say, 2 or 3 panels, full body panels in front of me. I've got 2 behind me. I'm essentially mimicking what a pod can do. In that context, you might want to adjust it's so much light that you probably want to adjust the intensity of the panels down quite a bit. For that kind of treatment, you probably want to be more in the realm of like 40 to 50 milliwatts, 30 maybe milliwatts per square centimeter, not so much like higher radiances, 100-ish or more, which might be beneficial for, let's say, a device like this used on a joint or on a muscle where I want to maximize the depth of penetration with a very powerful light. In that kind of the whole body context, especially if your facial skin is exposed, you want to dial back the intensity a bit. So yeah, I would say that kind of setup is probably the most ideal. You're looking to just create an anti-inflammatory effect, pro-mitochondrial effect, to reduce oxidative stress, to promote general growth factors, stem cells, general tissue healing, skin healing. Some of the systemic benefits are probably mediated from the level of the skin, kind of create effects at the level of skin and trickle down from there. In addition to that, as I said before, I think it's always best to leverage systemic and local effects. And if you've got any specific areas of your body that need extra love, you've got some joints that hurt, almost everybody's got something. Or even if it's just like facial anti-aging, you just want to look younger, combine a targeted device for those specific purposes with the full body device. And then if you want to really maximize systemic stem cells, you get a device, something more like this, that is powerful, that you can apply to those bony areas to stimulate stem cell release. And, all of this can be done in a very time efficient way that you could potentially do all three things at the same time. You can potentially get two devices that you use together. And yeah, and the overall benefits that you get, almost everybody will notice some benefits from doing this. Sometimes it's when people have it in their routine all the time, they notice the benefit when they stop doing it. So they use it for a few months. Oh, okay, now I went a week without it. Now I'm noticing, oh, wow, I'm lower energy. I have, brain fog. I'm not recovering as fast. I'm not sleeping as well. And then you go back to it and you realize what it's doing for you.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. What are you hoping the reader, particularly my readers, are going to get from this? Is it clarity?
Yeah, number one is clarity, because as I said, this whole space is the Wild West as far as tons of junk devices, tons of bad claims from device manufacturers. And you have this huge landscape of all these different devices where, as I said, so many of them are junk, but even among the good ones, how do you know which one to get? And what I'm doing here with this book is, number one, providing a map of that territory. So you can go, what do I want to achieve? What are the key principles that I need to have in order for effective light therapy, photobiomodulation for my specific objective or my objectives? And then based on that, okay, now I understand the flow chart. The map means I want this and this goal, health goal, this benefit, and therefore I need this and this type of device. What are the best types of device to achieve those goals? Okay. And how do I avoid this huge landscape of all these junk devices and garbage claims that people are making? And the other thing that I'm trying to achieve with this book, two other things. One is to clean up the industry, because I'm also publishing third-party lab data on a lot of these devices and exposing the fraud and the lying that many companies are engaged in. So, and I'm encouraging people to only buy from manufacturers that are publishing third-party data showing the actual measurements of their devices, and refusing to do business with any company that does not do that. So I'm trying to create an industry-wide effect where everybody adheres to transparent practices and is willing to publish the real data on their device, and everybody stops lying. But for the reader, the other big thing that I'm trying to do is, if you're just a health geek and you're interested in learning about the science, this really amazing science of how photons of light interact with your biology, there's, I don't know, 200 pages or so of information basically taking you on this journey of how these photons of light, all these different layers of mechanisms of how they're interacting with your biology. So if you're interested in that, just to learn about this key piece of the story of human health, this book is a very, very rich guide to that.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Where do you want us to go and get it? I know it's available everywhere books are sold. I saw it on Amazon just the other day. Did you?
Yeah, go to Amazon. As of this podcast, though, this will probably change by the time you publish this. But as of right now, Amazon is like selling out every couple days. I don't know the details of it. Penguin Random House, my publisher, told me they buy a certain limited batch and then they sell out and then they quickly order another batch. And so I don't know why it's done that way, but sometimes the shipping is a bit delayed as of right now. But please go to Amazon because it helps boost my sales ranking and helps the book reach bestseller status and then amplifies it in Amazon's algorithm so it's shown to more people. So the more that people buy from Amazon, the better it is for the ranking of my book and my ability to reach more people. So I would appreciate it if you buy from Amazon. And if Amazon is showing you that it's like sold out or it's 2-week delay on shipping, feel free to get it from Barnes and Noble or wherever else online that doesn't have a big delay. But go to Amazon.
Perfect. All right. I'll have the link straight to Amazon. I know that we even linked it in our email. I think today or yesterday, I was like, put the Amazon link in there. So I know that we are doing that ourselves, and I'll have it in the show notes too. And Ariane, thank you so much for not only breaking it down, kind of the fundamental aspects of this, but then really showing us how we can leverage red light. It's naturally, well, obviously we're buying panels, but that's coming in to support our bodies. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always great hanging out with you.
Yeah, always. All right. See you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.